While Jhoan Duran was praised as the shiny new object that would make the largest difference for the Phillies' postseason outlook, Harrison Bader is proving that he is nothing to slouch at either. The outfield addition is making his case for why he should be the everyday center fielded and making the conversation and decision a bit difficult for Rob Thomson. I do want to highlight the recent strong play of Harrison Bader, why I think he's the exact right fit for what this team needed in a way that I did not expect to be the case when the deal did go down. So let's jump right into things and kind of want to talk about the outfield picture as a whole. This has been a topic that has sort of lingered over our heads since the start of the season. Of course, the Phillies investing in Max Kepler and him not quite pulling his weight for the large portion of the season. Although I got to give him credit, he is not going away and continuing to produce. Nick Castellanos currently looking like he could be the odd man out, which is insane to think about when you factor what this outfield rotation looked like just a couple months ago, with Castellanos essentially being the only stable piece of that core. But let's highlight a little bit of exactly that what we do have from Harrison Bader here. And I do initially just want to start with his overall stats for the season. So to pull this out on the year overall, 14 home runs, 47 RBIs, a 349 on base percentage, has also walked 34 times, tallying 95 hits across his 351 at bats there, struck out 102. And to highlight a little bit more, that I did want to pull up his stats just while with the Phillies. So taking a peek at these stats for Bader, that he's batting 313 at the plate with a 385 on base percentage there, 488 slugging, an 872 OPS, 143 WRC plus, 9 RBIs, and 9 extra base hits. And I love this bottom part, pure energy. That yes, Harrison Bader thus far, shout out to our guy Luke Arcani, says Harrison Bader has been here for a month and already has 4 3-hit games. The thing that stands out to me the most about Bader is he's the most balanced outfielder that we've really had throughout his tenure. When you want to talk defense, that dude covers some serious ground and can read a fly ball better than anyone. Like, to contrast him with Johan Rojas here, Rojas was a guy very much praised for his defensive impact. This is a guy who has all the tools to be an elite center fielder, but he also would go through like the mental funks and like not read balls correctly, and was so reliant on his natural athleticism and speed there that most of the time he got there, but it was not always the cleanest route. When you look at Harrison Bader, that the second that ball pops off the bat, he knows exactly where it's landing. The little crab walk getting back. I know it's not how you teach it. They usually backpedal is the number one thing to avoid from an outfield perspective, but he's figured out his style, man. And I do think that swagger directly is something that translates on this Phillies team. That I know that there are personalities with this Phillies roster, but it's felt to go through the motions at times. There's something about Bader that brings a spark, that brings an energy. The dude is just a ball player in a way that I think this Phillies team needed. And by the way, I'm not the only one noticing this. That we get quotes like this from Rob Thomson when asked about Harrison Bader, saying, "I love him," speaking about everything that he brings from a personality perspective. And the interview that Bader did out in center field, I know it's kind of controversial, the in-game interviews that we do see, and I will say for the most part, I feel like they get generally nothing out of the players. It was really cool to see his perspective on stuff. And I think that was the most I appreciate one, that he was asked about the process of being traded at the deadline, which is something that this is not the first time that this has happened in his career. And he talked about that it's important to let your play do the talking. That there's so much conversations about how do you fit into a lineup and how do you fit in a locker room, that the reality is at the end of the day, he's judged on his production, and that's all he's focused on. He also had a funny line jogging off where he was asked about the Philly fanatic, in which he called him his best friend here, which I love. The Bader experience has been awesome, and honestly, the eye test has checked out even before the numbers have fully caught up to him. But since that has been the case, this is looking like the type of needle-moving addition that I don't think we talked about it in that light when the deal first went down. And just to acknowledge the trade deadline acquisitions for this Phillies team, shout out to Jeff Kerr tweeting, Jhoan Duran since joining the Phillies. 10.2 innings pitched, 10 hits, 2 earned runs, 13 strikeouts, a 1.76 ERA. Harrison Bader since joining the Phillies. 316 batting average with 12 runs scored, 6 doubles, 1 third base, 2 home runs, 9 RBIs, 6 walks, and an 876 OPS. These were Dave Dombrowski's trade deadline acquisitions. Now, one of the larger discussion points is the future of Harrison Bader, that he's a $10 million mutual option for next season, that obviously it's dependent on both him and the team's outlook for whether or not that is going to be one that gets picked up. I'll be honest, my initial gut reaction that I felt most of the time is that feels a bit steep for Harrison Bader, but then when I think about it, they paid that same amount of money for Max Kepler, and I do think, and I've even seen from like baseball minds that I respect, the belief that Bader will opt out of that and seek a higher average annual value for a payout. Maybe there is a long-term deal in place. That is a conversation that we're going to kind of put to the side, because I do think how the rest of the season and postseason run dictates a lot of what that outlook is. But the point being here that there is a pathway to him remaining in Philadelphia and potentially being a part of their long-term outfield picture. I also think that there's a lot of other factors to bring in. What is the expected, I guess, future of Justin Crawford? Does Johan Rojas, is that a guy that they're completely throwing out, that they're giving up on? Marsh, Kepler, there's a lot of questions. Castellanos, who, by the way, has not done himself any favors of late. Now, the Castellanos conversations, I've always been a stick on Nick Castellanos Island, that I got my 10 toes down on Cassie Island. When it's bad, man. And that's been the case the entire time. What I have sympathy for is I'm always going to kind of rock with the guy that your biggest issue is him not playing enough. And I think a lot of these quotes get blown out of proportion. For example, he was asked about a play, and during this matchup, which was one where he was pulled for defensive reasons, and for what it's worth, 1000% agree with Rob Thomson that he should be pulled for defensive reasons in the final innings of games. That 1000% should happen. That when you have improved options, which have not been the case throughout the entirety of his tenure here, you should use those better options. When Nick Castellanos was your best option, and by the way, to his credit, he's made some big defensive plays for this Phillies team, sliding grabs in the playoffs. He's not going to win any sort of gold glove, but he gives you everything he's got, and that's another thing that I appreciate about his game here. But when you do have better options, as is now currently the case, then use them. But Nick Castellanos was asked about the concept of being taken out of games for defensive substitutions, and the question was if it's frustrating to be replaced defensively in the middle of the ninth, or in the ninth inning after having a pretty solid game defensively, and he just said yes. This is the Nick Castellanos experience, man. Like, he's gonna tell you what you want to hear. There's some athletes that are good quotes and some that are pretty boring to the media. Castellanos is gonna be a guy who's gonna answer what you ask him here. He won't give you the PR answer. He won't beat around the bush here. He's gonna answer what you ask, even if that's probably not what the Phillies want him to say or in his best interest. Now, my biggest advice would say to Jess Castellanos, his wife, you're just never going to win the argument of fighting on Twitter. It's nonstop of sticking up for her husband there. And I get it. Like, it would bother me in that spot too, but it's just a losing battle. And I think it makes everyone in a worse outlook here. For Nick Castellanos specifically, could also do yourself a couple favors by maybe phrasing these answers slightly different here. But the bottom line is, it's going to come down to what his bat looks like from a playoff perspective. I don't think Nick Castellanos is going to be a guy that is lost because of this sort of rotation here. That I think, if anything, it fires him up. That I think we've seen good responses, that when he has seen his time cut or been taken out, that he typically responds with a bit of a fight in him, a bit of a passion. Like, I respect that about him. I like guys that want to compete, want to play, and that's the issue more so than anything with him. With all that said, that does not mean that I guarantee that he will be in right field from a playoff perspective. That Max Kepler, to give him his credit, and by the way, let me take a peek at Castellanos' overall stats on the season before sort of switching over. That he's got 16 home runs, 61 RBIs, a 295 on-base percentage, 402 slugging percentage. Across his 495 at-bats, has 124 hits, 115 strikeouts there. And the guy that has not gone away to any extent has been Max Kepler. That, yes, it was a disastrous start to the season, but all of a sudden his on-base percentage sneaking up to 299, his slugging up to 376. He's got 14 home runs, 43 RBIs, 77 hits, and 76 strikeouts there. The idea of what Max Kepler should be or could be still makes sense on this Phillies team. The unfortunate reality is we're not sure if he is that guy or not. We see the short doses. When that left-handed swing is looking sweet, when he's got some power behind it, I see the vision. But it's to be determined if that's real or if that's sustainable. And I don't think Kepler's another guy who's hold up and quit. I think he tries. I think he wants it. There's been some really honest answers, inter-perspective answers about his struggles here. But at the end of the day, this is a game about results, and we got to see it. And I did want to shout out real quick Brandon Marsh, who's been tearing the cover off the baseball lately. Now, his stats on the season don't blow you away. That 8 home runs, 31 RBIs, 316 at-bats, has tallied 87 hits and struck out 90 times. The strikeout tendency is probably the biggest thing that I would throw against him, and particularly when you're comparing him to a guy like Castellanos. I don't think you can play like Castellanos and Marsh as your two corner outfields because they're both so high strikeout guys. Now, granted, Kepler's not the best at it, and Bader, a solid job at better. Still not a guy that is like elite at, not striking out or battling. He's not Bryson Stott or Trey Turner in that regard. But by any means, I think the positive that we should take from it is that there's actual options in this Phillies outfield. That it felt like slim pickings for so long. Now there's guys that each have a case for why they belong, why they should receive additional opportunity, and that should be celebrated within this Phillies team. So we'll see ultimately what happens in this outfield picture. But the guy that I view as right now is the clearest lock to be a staple from a playoff perspective is the dude they brought in the trade deadline as Harrison Bader. That feels to me like the guy that in the very short-term future will be crowned the everyday center fielder. He's done everything possible to earn that opportunity in the plate, in the field, and in the locker room here. And I do think that the rest of the outfield, it makes a lot more sense when it's fitting around Harrison Bader. We'll see ultimately if Rob Thomson sees things the same way. It is a bit of a limp to the finish line or coast to the finish line kind of feeling based on how these standings are coming out. But we still got a series against the Mets to kind of put the nail in the coffin, secure the NL East, and still chasing that first round bye from a playoff perspective. So the job is not entirely finished to this point. The game certainly still mattered from a wins and losses perspective. And you still got to figure out that what is the best, most complete version of this Phillies team. But I feel a whole lot better about the outfield outlook with Harrison Bader being the headline of all of that. So let me know if you guys are as fired up as I am, but I do believe there is something about a swagger and energy that he brings to this Phillies team that were necessary. When you pair that with the production that he is bringing, sign me up for the Harrison Bader experience, and that's exactly what I expect and hope the Phillies to do. So let me know if you guys are with me in the comments. Appreciate you guys tuning into this video. As always, we're in the home stretch before the playoff run and going to continue crushing it right here on Phillies Digest. So want as many of you as possible a part of the Phillies Digest family. So if you have not already, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video here. I'll be back to talk with you next time. Peace.